cardboard guitar. 15 years of rejection. One desperate teenager who had run out of options and was about to run out of time. When Ollie Brooks stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, he wasn't just performing for the judges, he was performing for his life. Behind the scenes, security was already looking for him. In a few hours, he'd either be discovered and sent back to the system that had failed him, or he'd find something he'd never had before, someone who believed in him. Simon Cowell thought he was about to see another young hopeful chasing fame. He had no idea he was about to meet a kid who would force him to choose between following rules and following his heart. What Ollie did with a guitar made from garbage would have been impressive enough. But what Simon did when security came to take Ollie away, that changed everything. In front of millions of viewers, Simon Cowell became more than a judge. He became a protector. Let me take you back to the moment before everything changed for a boy who had been invisible his entire life. It was Wednesday afternoon at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, and America's Got Talent was in the middle of what would become its most talked about season. The familiar energy buzzed through the venue, 300-400 audience members, bright stage lights, and the anticipation that comes with live television. Simon Cowell sat at the judges' table in his signature black t-shirt and tailored blazer, reviewing notes from the morning's auditions. Sofia Vergara was chatting with Heidi Klum about the previous contestant, while Howie Mandel made jokes to keep the energy light between tapings. Terry Crews was working the crowd, his infectious enthusiasm keeping everyone engaged. Everything was running like the well-oiled machine that had made AGT America's favorite talent show. But 3 blocks away, something was happening that would disrupt that machine completely. Oliver Brooks crouched behind a dumpster in an alley, clutching his homemade guitar and trying to steady his breathing. At 15, he was small for his age. Years of inconsistent meals and constant stress had left him thin and wiry, but his hands were strong from the construction work he'd done under the table to survive on the streets. Ollie had been running for 3 days now, running from Riverside Group Home, the latest in a long line of institutions that had housed him since he was 3 years old. Running from Mrs. Henderson, the director who had made it clear that artistic pursuits were a waste of time for kids like him. Running from a system that had moved him through 12 different placements in 12 years, each one a little worse than the last. But mostly he was running toward something, toward the one dream that had kept him alive through years of rejection, abuse, and abandonment, toward America's Got Talent and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would finally see something in him worth keeping. The guitar in his arms looked like trash because it basically was. He'd built it himself over 6 months using a cardboard box he'd found behind a music store, strings salvaged from broken instruments and dumpsters, and duct tape to hold it all together. It didn't look like much, but it could make music, and music was the only thing that had never abandoned him. Ollie had discovered his voice at age 8, singing softly to himself in a foster home where children were expected to be seen and not heard. By 10, he was writing songs, scribbling lyrics on scraps of paper and hiding them in his pillowcase. By 13, he'd taught himself guitar using YouTube videos on library computers, practicing silently with his fingers on air when he couldn't access an actual instrument. Music was his escape, his companion, his hope, and now it was his last chance. "Sir, we need to see some identification," came a voice from the street. Ollie's blood ran cold. Security guards were canvassing the area, showing his photo to anyone who would look. The group home had reported him as a runaway, and they were closing in. Ollie looked at his watch, a broken thing he'd found in a pawn shop, but it still told time. He had maybe an hour before they expanded their search to include the theater district. This was it. Do or die time. He slung his cardboard guitar across his back and started moving toward the Dolby Theater, keeping to alleys and side streets, his heart pounding with every step. Inside the theater, the afternoon session was running behind schedule. 3 acts had already performed, and the energy was good, but not spectacular. Simon was checking his watch, thinking about dinner plans, when a production assistant approached the judges' table. "Mr. Cowell, "We have an unusual situation," Maria whispered discreetly. "We have a walk-in contestant. No appointment, no audition tape, but he says he has something special to show you." Simon raised an eyebrow. Walk-ins were extremely rare and usually resulted in security escorts off the property. AGT was one of the most difficult shows to get onto. Contestants went through months of screening, background checks, and preliminary auditions. "What makes this one different?" Simon asked. He's 15, he's alone, and Maria paused, looking uncertain. "He built his own guitar, out of cardboard, and when he played it for the security guard, grown men started crying." Simon's interest was piqued. In 20 years of judging, he'd learned to recognize the difference between genuine talent and desperate attention-seeking. Something about this situation suggested the former. "5 minutes," Simon said. "Give him 5 minutes to audition in the back. If it's worth our time, we'll see him." What Simon didn't know was that 5 minutes might be all the time they had before Ollie's past caught up with him. 20 minutes later, Terry Crews was announcing the next act to an audience that had no idea they were about to witness something unprecedented. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Oliver Brooks." The curtain rose and Ollie walked onto the stage. The audience's first reaction was concern. Even from a distance, it was obvious that something was different about this contestant. His clothes were too big, clearly second-hand or donated. His hair looked like he'd cut it himself. He moved with the careful posture of someone who had learned not to take up too much space, not to draw too much attention. But it was the guitar that really caught everyone's attention. Simon leaned forward, studying the instrument with fascination. It was clearly homemade, constructed from what appeared to be a medium-sized cardboard box with a crude neck attached. Duct tape held various pieces together, and the strings looked like they'd been salvaged from multiple sources. "Good afternoon," Terry said warmly, as Ollie reached center stage. "What's your name, son?" "Oliver Brooks, sir, but everyone calls me Ollie." His voice was quiet but clear, with a slight rasp that suggested he'd done more talking to himself than to other people. "And how old are you, Ollie?" 15, sir." "Where are you from?" Ollie hesitated for just a moment. "I'm from a lot of places, sir. I don't really have a home." Simon's attention sharpened. There was something in the boy's tone that suggested a story much deeper than typical teenage drama. "And what's that interesting instrument you have there?" Terry continued. Ollie looked down at his guitar, and for the first time a small smile crossed his face. "I made it myself, sir. I know it doesn't look like much, but it works. It makes music, and that's all that matters." "How long did it take you to build it?" "About 6 months. I had to find the pieces gradually. The box came from behind Morrison's music store. The strings from, well, various places. The neck is from an old chair leg I found." The audience was beginning to understand that they weren't looking at a quirky prop. They were looking at necessity turned into art, poverty transformed into creativity. Simon found himself studying Ollie more intently. There was something about this kid that reminded him of himself at that age. The hunger, the determination, the sense that music was less a choice than a survival mechanism. "So what are you going to play for us today, Ollie?" Terry asked. Ollie's expression became more serious, more focused. "I wrote a song, sir. It's called Invisible. It's about, it's about people like me, people that society doesn't really see." "All right, Ollie, the stage is yours." The lights dimmed, leaving Ollie in a single spotlight. For a moment he stood perfectly still, his fingers finding position on his makeshift guitar. The theater was completely silent, 300-400 people waiting to see what this unusual boy would create. Then Ollie began to play. The first notes that came from his cardboard guitar were nothing short of miraculous. Despite its humble construction, the instrument produced a sound that was warm, resonant, and completely authentic. But more than the technical achievement of making music from trash, there was something in the way Ollie played that suggested a deep, personal relationship with every note. When he began to sing, his voice filled the theater with a quality that seemed impossible from someone so young. "They walk right past me every day like I'm a ghost that's in their way. 15 years and no one stayed. I'm invisible. Invisible." Simon's mouth fell open slightly. This wasn't just talent. This was artistry born from real experience, real pain, real truth. Foster homes and empty beds, promises that were never kept, learned to live inside my head. I'm invisible. Invisible. The audience was beginning to react, not with the polite attention usually given to young performers, but with the kind of focused engagement that comes when people recognize they're hearing something genuine. But when I play this guitar made of dreams and sing these words that no one's ever heard, I'm not invisible anymore, I'm not invisible anymore. Sophia was wiping tears from her eyes. Heidi had stopped taking notes and was staring at Ollie with complete absorption. Howie was watching with the kind of intensity he usually reserved for acts that genuinely moved him, but it was Simon's reaction that was most profound. As Ollie continued his song, telling a story of abandonment, resilience, and hope in lyrics that were far too mature for his 15 years, Simon began to understand that he wasn't just hearing a performance. He was hearing a life story sung by someone who had lived every word. They said I'd never amount to much, a throwaway kid without a family's touch, but I've got music in my soul that makes me whole, makes me whole. As Ollie reached the bridge of his song, something shifted in his performance. His voice became stronger, more confident, as if the act of singing his truth was transforming him in real time. So here I stand on this stage tonight, fighting for my chance to shine my light. No more hiding, no more fear. I am here, I am here. The audience was completely captivated. This wasn't entertainment. This was testimony, delivered with a raw honesty that cut through every defense and pretense. But it was during the final chorus that something happened that no one in the theater expected. As Ollie sang the words, "I'm not invisible anymore," the theater's back doors opened and two security guards entered, scanning the audience and stage area. They were followed by a woman in a business suit, clearly someone in authority. Ollie saw them immediately. His voice faltered for just a moment, his eyes widening with fear. But then something remarkable happened. Instead of stopping, instead of running, he continued singing, his voice growing stronger with each word. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm standing here. Can't ignore the boy who built his dreams from trash. Won't let this moment pass. The security guard spotted him and began moving toward the stage. The woman in the suit was pointing at Ollie and speaking rapidly into a phone. Simon noticed the commotion and realized immediately what was happening. This wasn't just a talented kid with a sad story. This was a runaway, and they were here to take him back. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm worth fighting for. I'm worth fighting for. Ollie finished his song just as the security guards reached the edge of the stage. The theater erupted in applause, but it was chaotic applause. The audience could sense that something was happening beyond the performance. Terry looked confused. The other judges were looking around, trying to understand the situation, and Ollie stood center stage, his cardboard guitar in his hands, staring at the people who had come to take him away. That's when Simon Cowell did something that broke every rule of television production. He stood up from his chair, walked around the judges' table, and climbed onto the stage. The cameras followed him, the audience watched in confusion, and the security guards paused, uncertain about how to proceed when a celebrity was involved. Simon walked directly to Ollie and positioned himself between the boy and the approaching authorities. "Stop," Simon said, his voice carrying clearly through the theater's sound system. "Everyone just stop." The security guards hesitated. The woman in the suit looked uncertain. The entire production ground to a halt as Simon Cowell, one of the most powerful men in entertainment, stood protectively in front of a 15-year-old runaway. "Ollie," Simon said quietly, but his microphone picked up every word. "Those people, they're here for you, aren't they?" Ollie nodded, tears beginning to stream down his face. "Yes, sir. They're from the group home. I ran away to come here." Simon turned to face the security guards and the woman in the suit. "And you are?" "Mrs. Henderson, Riverside Group Home," the woman replied curtly. "This boy is a ward of the state. He's been missing for 3 days. We need to take him back immediately." Simon's expression hardened. "Before you take him anywhere, I think everyone in this theater needs to understand what just happened here." He turned to address the audience, his voice carrying an authority that silenced even the smallest whisper. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed wasn't just a performance. What you witnessed was a 15-year-old boy who has been failed by every system meant to protect him using music he taught himself, performed on an instrument he built from garbage to tell his story. The audience was hanging on every word, beginning to understand the full scope of what they were witnessing. This young man didn't run away from a loving home to chase fame. He ran away from a system that told him his dreams were worthless, that his talents didn't matter, that he was invisible. Simon looked back at Ollie, then at Mrs. Henderson. Before anyone goes anywhere, I have some questions. Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable but couldn't ignore Simon's authority. Mr. Cowell, this really isn't appropriate. Oliver needs to return to the facility immediately. Does the facility have a music program? Simon asked directly. We don't have resources for non-essential activities, Mrs. Henderson replied stiffly. Music therapy? Art therapy? Any creative outlets? Our focus is on basic care and life skills. Simon's voice became more intense. And in your professional opinion, Mrs. Henderson, what are this boy's prospects if he returns to your facility? What happens when he ages out of the system in 3 years? Mrs. Henderson's silence was answer enough. Simon turned back to Ollie, and what he said next would be replayed millions of times across social media and news outlets. Ollie, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. If you go back, will you be safe? Will you be supported? Will anyone help you develop this incredible gift you've just shared with us? Ollie wiped his eyes but met Simon's gaze directly. No, sir. They told me music was a waste of time. They said I needed to focus on realistic expectations. And what did they say your realistic expectations should be? Manual labor, sir. Maybe construction or janitorial work. They said kids like me don't get to have dreams. The theater was completely silent. 300-400 people were absorbing the reality that in 21st century America, talented children were still being told their gifts didn't matter. Simon looked back at Mrs. Henderson, then at the security guards, then at his fellow judges who were watching this unprecedented situation unfold. Here's what's going to happen, Simon announced, his voice carrying absolute conviction. Ollie is not leaving this theater tonight as a runaway. He's leaving as a contestant who just delivered one of the most powerful performances in AGT history. Mrs. Henderson started to protest, but Simon held up a hand. And tomorrow, my legal team will be in touch with the appropriate authorities to discuss a very different future for this young man, because what I just witnessed tells me that the system has failed Ollie far more than Ollie has failed the system. Simon walked to his golden buzzer, his intention clear. Ollie Brooks, you came here tonight with nothing but a guitar made from trash and a song that came from your heart. You're leaving here with something you've never had before. Someone who believes in you, someone who sees your value, and someone who's going to make sure you get the chance you deserve. He looked directly into the main camera, addressing millions of viewers. And to everyone watching at home who thinks this is just television, this is real life. This is what happens when we choose to see the invisible, when we choose to invest in potential instead of writing people off. Simon's hand hovered over the golden buzzer as he looked back at Ollie. You said you were invisible, Ollie, but you're wrong. You're not invisible. You've just been surrounded by people who chose not to see you. That changes tonight. He slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, but this time it felt different. This wasn't just celebration, it was transformation. It was the moment when a throwaway kid became someone worth fighting for. The audience erupted, but it was more than applause. People were crying, cheering, and expressing emotions that went far beyond entertainment. They had just witnessed something that transcended television. They had seen humanity at its best and worst and watched love triumph over system failure. Through all the celebration, the cameras captured the moment that would become the most meaningful clip in AGT history. Ollie, standing in the center of the stage, surrounded by falling gold confetti, still clutching his cardboard guitar, looking at Simon with an expression of disbelief and hope. "Thank you," Ollie whispered, but his microphone carried the words throughout the theater. "Thank you for seeing me." Simon walked over and put his arm around Ollie's shoulders. You don't need to thank me for seeing what was always there. You just needed someone to look. 3 months later, Oliver Brooks not only won America's Got Talent, but his victory sparked a national conversation about children aging out of foster care and the importance of supporting creative programs in group homes and foster facilities. His winning performance was an original song called Home, about finding family in unexpected places and learning that home isn't a place, it's the people who choose to love you. But the numbers and accolades weren't the real story. The real story was that Simon Cowell, true to his word, had worked with family court attorneys to become Ollie's legal guardian, providing him with the stable home he'd never had while supporting his musical education and career development. The cardboard guitar that started it all was retired to a place of honor in Simon's home studio, but Ollie now played instruments that could properly showcase his talent. He still preferred acoustic guitars and wrote songs that spoke to the experiences of forgotten children everywhere. Ollie's debut album, Invisible No More, became the best-selling debut album by a former foster child in recording history, but more importantly, a portion of every sale went to the Oliver Brooks Foundation, an organization that provided musical instruments and creative therapy programs to group homes and foster facilities across the country. Mrs. Henderson retired from her position at Riverside Group Home 6 months after the AGT episode aired. Her replacement instituted new policies that included music therapy, art programs, and individualized support for children with special talents. And Ollie Brooks, who had spent 15 years believing he was invisible, became one of the most recognized advocates for foster children in America. His speeches to lawmakers, his concerts at group homes, and his mentorship of other aging out foster kids created ripple effects that changed lives across the country. During his first major concert tour, Ollie returned to Los Angeles for a special performance at the Dolby Theater, the same stage where his life had changed. In the audience sat Simon Cowell, no longer his judge but his guardian, watching with pride as the boy who had walked on stage with a cardboard guitar now commanded the stage with confidence and grace. 2 years ago, Ollie told the audience, I stood on this stage and sang about being invisible. Tonight, I want to sing for every kid who feels the same way. You are not invisible. You are not throwaway. You are worth fighting for. As he performed his latest song, Family by Choice, the cameras panned the audience and found dozens of former foster children, group home residents, and kids who had aged out of the system, all there because one boy had been brave enough to run toward his dream instead of away from his pain. The lesson Oliver Brooks taught America that night is profound. Talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not. And sometimes the most important thing we can do is choose to see the invisible, to fight for the forgotten, and to believe in potential, even when it comes wrapped in cardboard and duct tape. Simon Cowell learned that being a judge isn't just about finding talent, it's about recognizing when someone needs more than a score or critique. Sometimes they need an advocate, a protector, a family, and Ollie proved that the most powerful performances come not from perfect circumstances, but from the courage to sing your truth, even when you're scared, even when you're alone, even when the whole world seems determined to prove you don't matter. The golden confetti from that night has been swept away, but the golden moment it represented, when a man with power chose to protect a boy without it, when a system failure became a redemption story, when invisible became unforgettable. That moment continues to inspire change, challenge assumptions, and prove that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about someone finally choosing to see you, to fight for you, to love you exactly as you are, cardboard guitar and all.